Hey, Justice.
Hey, yo, how's it going?
Good, good, good. Stay with us. We're pretty excited. We have lawnmowers, weed eaters. We
Lots
have
of
dogs. We
wins.
got movies
Crazy
going
day to
on in the
go. Yeah,
house. Yeah,
lots
yeah.
set up going.
Yeah, I heard, Nathan here, Nathan Erznosnik,
Justice Daniels,
here with
ThriveWorks 360.
ThriveWorks 360. Justice, let's just start with a quick story, and it had to do with flying.
Oh, yeah.
Today, just share that with everybody. I think they'd love to hear what you did today.
Yeah, it was really cool. Be able to go up in an airplane. So I'm interested in getting a pilot's license. And then I got to go on a demo flight. So I was able to take off the plane, do a little bit of flying when I was up in the sky. But yeah, it's been a little bit of a childhood dream. So it's really cool to be able to do that, Nathan. And it was about 2 hours long and some pretty cool lessons to see in it, overcoming a little bit of the nerves about, how's that going to be? But yeah, it was a really fun day.
I know you've been looking to do that for quite some time, right?
Yeah. No, probably since I was 8 years old or something, I've always wanted to fly. So it'll be cool to see.
And then I know you were like, boy, I wish I maybe had a little bit more time.
Oh,
that was pretty fun.
I was like, I was almost unsatisfied because I was like, well, I didn't get too steered enough or do whatever with it. So I was like, I need a little more.
You talked about maybe they just kind of left it open enough that you're like, I need to get more, right?
Me, making me want to go on to the next bit and go, okay, go ahead and pay for the $10,000 for the pilot license, So, well, and the school and the training and all that is.
All that stuff. With that, Justice, what I'd like to do is today, I just want to start, everybody who's out there, thanks for being with us. I wanted to touch base with maybe where are you at today in your life? What are challenges and things that are holding you back? And so I'm having you think about this because, Justice, I'm going to come back to you with a question that has to do with blinders being removed. And I think you had some interesting experiences this week.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll kind of get to that. But stay with us. We're going to talk about a few of those things that Justice experienced this week as well. Part of our goal with ThriveWorks 360, and I think this has continued to change a little bit as we better understand Justice, right? Maybe what each of us love doing more than anything. What would be, a true strength and a talent, or
where do you spend your time?
Where do you spend your time? Like, why would that be? And I would come back to this. One thing I've learned is it's not just how you spend your time. It's if I do that, can I amplify or do things better because it's something that is I'm naturally skilled and talented. And some people might be putting out there like, oh, I'm not sure if that's true. I really do believe it's true. I believe that there are a few tracks that when you continue to fine tune what you do and how you do them, you end up getting and doing a lot more. So we're going to come back to some questions for you, but let's talk about that first. A little bit about maybe where do you feel like you're at today, Justice, with something that you do well? And let's have you just share what that is and
a specific thing I do well, or
whatever comes to mind. I asked you that question. What comes to mind?
Okay. Yeah. So I think with where I'm at today on something I'm trying to look at and do is when I do something well, whether that's maybe a job responsibility in what I'm currently working on or what it is, I'm choosing to look at things a little differently, if that makes sense. I'm choosing to look at how I can trust others a little more in the things I don't do so well and ask for a little bit more trust in the things I do well to, especially in a team environment, excel growth. You know what I mean? To go, all right, we can create this amplification on going, well, because you're good at this and you can go channel in on it, you're going to move through things quicker. You're probably going to hit more things that I might miss because it's not my strong suit. Maybe I don't like it. You talk about that. That's where my mind goes with that. And where I'm at today is trying to lean into that, I'd say, and searching for more and more of those things. Because I'd say I think it's a pretty long journey to finding what exactly it is that you do best. I don't know if I'd say I know fully. I have maybe a handful of things I could go through and be like, oh, I'm doing these things pretty good. But as a whole, I think I'm still day to day going, okay, that was maybe more enjoyable, or I did that a little bit easier, or felt good when I did that type of thing over something else. So I'm trying to track those and adjust, if that's kind of...
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
With that, Justice, I'm going to ask you about some of the blinders that came off, and it had to do with some self-limitations.
Frame of mind
stuff. Where you're at. Had a honeymoon recently?
Yeah. Honeymoon recently.
And where did you go? Quickly tell us that.
Went up to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, up there in the Teton Village. It was super cool. It was an awesome time. And I think I know where you're going with some of these blinders that comes off. Because if anyone knows of that area, it's got quite a bit of money in it. There's a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs coming there visiting, and I'd say a lot of successful people in various areas. And one of the things I think I shared with you, Nathan, coming back from this was, and this is kind of where, oh, what do I do well or what don't I do, is noticing how people were choosing to make money, how people were choosing to do business, how, and more than that, the people that lived in this area, how they chose to just live their life, which created one, the perception, and two, the reality of what is their life. And so if I was to say, what does that mean? It's like, okay, well, let's talk about, I'm out at these restaurants and I think on average, you're spending like $100, for two people to eat, even if it's just some burgers, because it's the burger's almost $30. You get a drink, there's fries, it's like, okay, this is crazy. So it's like the server, how much must they maybe be making? So it's like, hey, how do you, where do you come to work here? Because this seems crazy expensive. And no one, almost no one acknowledged the fact of the price point. It was just, oh, here's what I do to live this life that I live. And they enjoyed it, right? Whatever their trade-offs were. And that was this big shift for me. And I'd say that's where I've started being lately with what do I do well and how do I see things. And this mind shift is because if I can apply that to what I'm doing today, how much faster can I work through stuff? Because I'm just not putting barriers up of, oh, it's expensive, so I can't do it. It's, oh, it's expensive, so this is what I do to do that, and here's my plan for connecting with that.
Yeah.
Is that making
Yep,
sense?
it
And
does.
maybe it's sounding...
It does. And we'll come back and kind of, we'll build on this because I think there were some things that you also started applying a little bit in. Again, we talked about some of your learning in the past.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about how you've got a lot going on. You've got school going on. Yeah. You've got a full-time job, director of marketing. Also, you've got personal development. You've got ThriveWorks happening. In addition to that, I know there's some business ownership as well. So all those things are pretty intense. And so, Justice, with that, you kind of talked about right now, and I want to just quickly refer to a couple things. I'm going to say it's an abundance mindset, or I can say it's a scarcity mindset. And I think one of the things that you're kind of referring to is the way we frame something can determine part of how we actually work within it.
Yeah,
like I could say I could go in somewhere and say, I'm in a spot where financially I have made some decisions that allow me to spend if it's $50 a mil. And in my mind, that is not something that I shouldn't do or is too expensive or is not right to do, because part of what you're doing and where you're going, you're like, I should be able to, again, afford, or I'm going to be working. Again, that might sound a little bit off, but I think there are complete different ways to look at it. And that's not being irresponsible. Like, great, if you don't have the money, I'm going to say, don't go to Jackson Hole. Like that's not where you're going to, if you're going to go, part of the mindset is I think that you should have a budget and a plan and some things to be in that place to do what you want in order to enjoy it, and maximize it. So you were talking again about, nobody was worried about whatever the price was because it was normal or they were accustomed to what that is. And I'm going to say that's because they were thinking in their mindset, it fit into the lifestyle. They're living a lifestyle of abundance. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that versus the scarcity mindset too.
Yeah, I think that's perfect to what it is. Because even it was like you start looking at things like, going back to flight, it's, oh, this is maybe if I want to get the license, it's $15,000, let's say. And it's like, oh, that's a lot of money to go have the ability to fly myself up in a plane and go look at some sites. I'm like, there's no return on that. Why would I spend it? And then you're like, oh, well, actually, like, yeah, sure, you could afford it or not. But the value is what it is to do that to me, right? That's maybe the mental space I need to just clear my mind. It's like that hobby of what it is. And how that translates to business and what I was talking about there earlier with, oh, I've just been working through things quicker by being able to lean in, is I built a barrier naturally. And I don't identify it as a barrier, but I put a barrier up. Oh, $15,000. Even if it wasn't a barrier because I have that, I go do that, right? Or you can create the plan to do that. I made the barrier. And there's some concepts out there, like you can really boil things down. And this is something, if you look at Alex Hormozy, he talks about and leans into a lot, is it's what's the price and are you willing to pay it? And then how do you make it happen? Like for those people that work as servers making probably good money, $28 an hour or something is what like Target was starting at out there, which was crazy. They're willing to pay the price for their lifestyle. They want to live out in the beautiful Teton Mountains in the country and around these people that, what it is that elevates them. And that's where I think if I started applying that, what's the price? Am I willing to pay it? Let's connect with it, because there's a piece to it. I started thinking differently, and like I have a friend out there. That's the house we stayed in, and they're talking about when people fly in for vacation, they'll have their food brought to the house. They'll have cribs delivered for kids or toys, or just so the house is furnished so they can fully enjoy what that time is. On initial thoughts, I think some people go, oh, that's too lavish. Oh, that's this. And it's not that I want to focus on spending a lot of money to do this vacation, but they value their time enough that they're willing to do this because they're going to maximize their vacation. And they're probably doing that in business. And I think that's where we're trying to get to, right? Is what are the business decisions you're making? And it's the who, not what, not how. It's getting into changing that. And maybe you have some thoughts on how you've seen that applied.
Yeah, well, I'm going to come back to you on that too, because I know you've done some things and it had to do with learning. But yeah, just really quick. So think about this in your life if you're there, and maybe to piggyback on that is in their mind, in their life, in their style, because time is maybe the time is one thing that we all have the same of, by the way, right?
Absolutely.
That's the equalizer of all things. My aha too is that if there's a billionaire that has the same 24 hours in their day, they have the same days in their life, why and what have they done in order to use that time differently than I'm using that today? And I think that's partly where you're going. And I'm going to say it's just not about money. It's in your life, and time's a resource. And so I'm going to say, you personally, how are you using the time personally? If I were going to kind of add to this, and then I'll come back really quick. But again, a billionaires, a millionaires, somebody who makes 100,000, 50,000, and somebody's down, at the 20,000 mark, we all have the exact same hours in our day, how we're spending those, where we're spending those, and what we're spending that time on, either to amplify our current skill sets amongst some other things. Maybe it's Netflixing, right? So, but if we're doing this, again, it's only a difference of how we're using that time. And then some of you could say, Justice, that it's all, again, I'm just going to squash this right now. It's not because they're privileged. And yes, there are some of them that are out there. What I'm finding, Justice, with the people who are true, successful, who are successful, I'm going to say anything in your life with where they're at, is they understand time differently. Now, they might not have the same value on time, but the way they use that is different, because I've met people, again, and this might be you, if you're out there, I wish I can remember who quoted this, but they said, like Netflix and streaming is taking away the greatness that you have in you. And I know I can look this up, but I think it's just a very true statement, because it's destroying from who you can be, what you can accomplish, who you can know, and all those things. So coming back, I think that's one of those simple things is I'm trying to understand, how do I spend my time maybe differently? How do I use that more wisely? We talked about, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this either, but other people's time. Yeah. And I think we started going like, wow, there is more value if you can find a person who is better, that doesn't have my strengths, and I couple that with me in order to get an output. I think there's a lot of truth in that. So I'm right now really trying to understand where and how do I spend my time, and how are they doing it? And by the way, this is really simple. Most of it is always happening because they're trusting and finding others that like to do what they don't more so than they do, and they're better at it. And you end up coupling strength on person's strength, another person's strength, another person's strength. And that's actually business 101. That's how things get created. But Justice, let me come back to you. And here's the question I wanted to ask, because you talked about listening to a book and it was school. And I think you had this epiphany of things kind of happen if you put them in your mind of something that needs to be done, because
like framing and prioritizing it.
Yeah. Like, and again, I'll go back and I'll kind of prime this, and then I'd like you to kind of share this. You talked about, boy, I need to get through this book, or boy, I need to get through school. And you realize that that's happening much, much faster, because you decided, I might have a 5-minute drive. I might have 10 minutes here. Yeah. And you ended up going like, wow, because I have been applying myself in these pieces of time, I've gotten through A, B, C, D, E, and you're able to move through it when your mind normally would say, oh, I don't know if I'm going to have time. I don't know when I will be able to do that. So come back, maybe give us a grounding of a little bit again about all the things that you've got going on in your life. Yeah. If they are going on, the overwhelming feeling that you might have had, and how you are feeling different today than you did, and I'm going to say even last week. Yeah. And it might be even 3 weeks ago, but share that with us. I agree. I think it's going to be a good story.
Yeah, I think where you're coming from really is like, let's talk, and you hit on it. It's like, oh, full-time job. It's the side business stuff. It's the trying to finish up a degree so I can just get that off the books. I'm getting married soon, or well, I guess I did just get married. So that all those life events that are happening, and it's like, oh, I found for, and you mentioned last week, I found that for the past couple weeks, I kind of was almost in a woe of me state that I was super inefficient. And when I say super inefficient, it was just I wasn't getting through as much as I needed to. And seeing the shift I talked about earlier and these mindsets of with the books I've been reading, the Who, Not How, these other things, and then that trip to Jackson, right, the honeymoon, where I saw people just chose to live life that way, and it was okay. And like, I don't know if that has the power I feel when I say that, but what I mean by that is people chose that that's the life they wanted, and so they just lived it. And now you can say like, oh, that's super simple. But where I'm going with that is it's like, okay, well, the life I want to live or the things I want to do, whether it's get through school, whether it's doing those things, it's just, I'm going to choose to do those and then I make everything happen. So where I was going with that is it's like, okay, I've got to get through this course. And I believe it was, you passed over this video. It was like, it was like a 2 hour long podcast of, the guy who started Tabs Chocolate. And it was like, okay, I need to commit to watching this because there's this business principle in here that's going to help me excel at these other things I'm doing, or maybe this experience. So I realized I was like, today I'm just going to get through it throughout my day because I'm like, that's a lot of time. And I found little tidbits of time to click on and listen and engage with this. And what I found is that over even a working day, whether it was I had to go to another building for a meeting or I was walking, a good little chunk of time, it was like, oh, wow. I looked down at the end of this day that I thought I would have had no time in, that it was like, oh, 0 hours. And it was like, I got through an hour and a half of this. And it was like this huge epiphany that I was like, oh, when you commit to doing the thing, you will find the time. So let's fast forward to school, right? Like I was supposed to have another 2 semesters. Well,
Okay, I'm gonna pause you for just a second here.
yeah.
Let's go back. Because I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna start stacking what you
Oh,
started
yeah.
realizing
Well,
and what
yeah.
this was. But before that, so going back to everybody who's with us again, one of the things was, by the way, there's this information, this education, and I have a model that I built out. I kind of like it's leveling up, and you can take anybody else around. Let me just quickly talk about this, and
Yeah,
I'll say
go
how you
ahead.
apply this. I like to say take, and I'm gonna point. I'm gonna maybe point some fingers, and you're gonna point fingers. If you do so carefully, because I always say when you point one finger, there's three pointing back at you. So, but if that's the case, I want you to say in your mind, "Oh, I have these skills. I am good at these things, and I am better in this than who." You got a friend, you got a neighbor, and you're usually up. Like I'm talking, not just kind of a level up. Like who are you really better than something at? And you're like, I'm quite a bit better than somebody.
Yeah.
You can think about that, right? So you can kind of put that down there. And if you've got that in your mind and you're holding on to that place that's being better, what happens is you probably will have had an experience, you learned something, or you spent more time with something differently than they have. So I'm going to say, as an example, I'm a book reader. I like to try to hear and learn. I'm looking and I learn from mentors and books and these things. But every time I go and I learn a new skill, it might be at work, I learn to process something because I'm a processor. If there's somebody who doesn't, they actually can't do what I'm doing. I leveled up. And there's a lot of things, wisdom, there's skills, there's some strengths you can do. There's activities you can participate in. Any one of those is adding a notch, right? It's adding a notch to totem pole. So think about it. If you're the person, you're out there and you're like, I am better than this person, you might be a gamer. I'm going to throw this. Let's say you're a gamer. It's probably because you spent hours at it, right?
Absolutely.
Hours. Maybe you're a great binger. I'm going to throw that out there. And you know how to do that. Don't get in a room with me with the remote. I want 5 screens and I want 5 things happening, right? But if you think about those things are things that have made you better than somebody else next to you who has not spent the time, who hasn't had the experience, who hasn't learned this. And everybody thinks like, oh, and I'm going to go back to the use of time. And if it's a billionaire or millionaire, they've just leveled up. And if they haven't leveled up, they have found somebody that they can level up with as well.
Yeah.
So coming back to leveling up, and I don't know what I want to call that theory. I just kind of show a graph and I just show it. Another person's down here at the bottom. And every time you have an experience that differentiates yourself or you learn a new skill, or you work on a talent, you continue to separate yourself from the flow of everybody else. And so, but coming back to you, you talked about, again, listening to this book.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to come back to this, because I think there's this epiphany on this big life-changing thing that you're doing, which is schooling and completing it, that all of a sudden, because of you leveling up, you're finding that time is, you're compressing the time.
Yeah.
This goes back to using, and time becomes used differently.
Absolutely.
And you end up getting back to the beginning.
That's where that's
all of a sudden
coming
you're like,
from,
wow,
yes.
I ended up having more time, or it won't take as long because you're now putting A, B, C, and D together, and kind of you're stacking that. So how you use that is different than how you use that in the past. So again, 2 hours worth of information. You found that in an 8-hour day, because of breaks, traveling, and some other things, driving to work, driving home from work, right? These are all times you were able to get through almost all of that content in the same time when you thought maybe I won't. And now I'm going to be very careful and cautious with this, because this is not justice stopping in the middle of his workday. Because I'm going to say I'm opposed to that, because if you're messing up with my time and I'm paying for your time, I'm like, you're out of here, by the way, because I do not have a place for people that don't want to help create success. So this is all the additive things. So I'm going to be very clear. Comment on that if you want to. All you want. You can love or hate that. I am a lover of those that are excited about what they're involved with and adding to the value of a business and to their career and their life. So, all right, Justice. So coming back to you, talk about you and your...
Well, I guess lightly, I want to just say that intensity and focus of why I would be a believer that when you're committed to doing the work, you're in the work, is the same reason you can maximize the time in between the work or the things that surround it, is because you have this level of commitment that's going to propel you forward, right? And so I agree with that. But where I'm coming back to with the story and where it was going is, and this is within that last week and a half, is it's like, okay, there's that really cool experience. And then on top of that, I get this phone call from, the lady at school, and she's like, hey, I just want to let you know, I think you could finish school in the next month and a half. And this is when I thought I had like 8 more months of school left. And I was like, whoa, like, what is this? And she's like, well, it just seems like the one course you knocked out, you have these other 3 or 4 left, but they're really some papers. And she's like, have you looked at it in that way? And so there again was this validation of, oh, did you change your mind to look at things in this doable manner? Because I was just going to, let it slide, next semester do the other course. And she's like, well, really, here's what these are. So if I could help you see that, you're going to finish it in this time frame. So boom, we're starting to work through that, and we're on a pretty good track for it. I got through this other book, I've got through the content. But again, it was that principle of, have you looked at it in this way and made sure it looked achievable? And I think that's really the value of what's been happening to Stack, that helps create those level ups. And to say what my ultimate goal is to compress time as much as possible. And that's where it's like, oh, what does that mean? What does compressing time mean? Well, if you really start looking at what a lot of successful businesses and entrepreneurs are doing, is they're just taking the action steps to complete and to obtain that end goal. The quicker you can just stop waiting and creating obstacles or framing things, like we mentioned this, it's like, oh, I'm going to get a 4-year degree. Well, how long is that going to take me? 4 years. But if I say I'm going to get a degree and I'm going to do it, as quick as possible, it's no longer got a time frame. It's just as quick as I can get through it. And at first, whether you believe it's 4 years, 8 years, or 2 weeks, like people can chunk through these things a lot quicker just with a shift of mind. So that's where I'm going to say that's going and stacking onto, and what I've been trying to do is understanding compressing time. And I know we reference business and entrepreneurship a lot, but really, if you're a college kid, actually not working full time, I've got a unique situation with a transition out of the military, was able to get a job full time. Some other things from, I'm going to say, trying to compress my time even from an early on state. I knew I needed to compress that to kind of reach some goals I have in my life and for my family that I want to have. So really these, I would say, Nathan, and my focus is, don't think of it just as in the business, because it's, at Thrive, we talk about the operations and the mindset and how you need the mindset to have a solid operations. And maybe you could share some of the thoughts on what that is, but that's what I'm trying to practice out even more. And I think it's going pretty great here lately.
It is. Yeah, I think it's awesome. Let me kind of step in. Let me just make sure I do some reconfirmation for you. Yeah. And let's just do this as a quick practice. If you're with me right now, one of the things I want you to think of is, a lot of times I think people hear maybe some of these things that are out there. There's these potential bits of inspiration. There are, wow, look at all these people who are tremendously successful. And we tend to want to think that there are reasons that we cannot do that. And sometimes we just don't know what the steps are. And so let's not worry about saying we can or we can't. Let's move that to the side. What I want to do is come back and just say, in your life, there have been small wins. And we had talked about this a bit ago, but looking at the gains. And I would just ask you, and Justice, we'll come back to you in a minute, but I know that in your youth, you've mentioned this many times, you actually have already done this in your lifetime. And somehow you kind of moved back away from that. So I'm just talking, everybody who's here, take this in your mind, look over the last week, and you can be a big naysayer. But I'm going to say, let's find something that you felt was a small win in your life. Did you say hi to a friend that you hadn't said hi to? Say that's a different kind of thing. There might be an emotional one. At work, did you find that you were able to accomplish something in a little less time than you might have thought of? And if not, anything I'm bringing up, if you're like, nope, I'm not doing it. Nope, I didn't do that. Boy, I didn't do these things. Any one of these nopes, I'm going to say, boy, then what could you learn that you could change that on? Because the biggest challenge I have found is that we stay in where we are at today because we think the way we have always thought. And I'm putting this challenge. Think differently about what that is. Take a challenge this week. Take the challenge today. If you're like, well, no, this is tough, or I don't like this, or, you know, it's like, oh, I just got to get up to get to work. And, you know, like if there's a humdrum, anything in your life, why don't you just flip that? Why does it have to be a humdrum? It doesn't have to be a humdrum.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say, change any of it. Like a lot of people, I hear this, like, oh, my job's so hard. And I'm going to say, okay, I want to be careful, but I want to say, to me, hard's like lifting 80 pounds over and over and over. Like that is some physical labor hard. If it's anything else and it's in your head, I'm telling you, you can change that. It does not need to be hard. And you might be saying, well, why or how? Come back. We'll talk about more videos on a way to flip that. And often it gets out of sight of you thinking just about yourself and thinking about others, or accomplishing something that's varied from what is me in my life, because everything we learn, Justice, comes from outside sources. And that's a whole nother discussion as well. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up really quick from our mindsets, because when I'm hearing your story, I know that you went and got an $11,000 loan when you were, I don't know, 12-year-old, 11-year-old.
Oh, well, I got an investor because I wanted to do a potato business.
Yeah, how old were you there?
Oh, dude, I was like 10 or 11. Yeah,
10 or 11. So I'm gonna walk you through this. So you were 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Some guy gave you literally $11,000 to go do a potato business. At the end of the day, it wasn't able to come through because everybody's like, how am I doing business with this 11-year-old? But long story short, you already had the mindset that you could accomplish great things.
Yeah.
And I think that in your life, there's been ups or downs. And I think now you're on an upward trend.
Yeah.
And what I'd love you to come back and maybe you can share. I want you just to think about right now, why are you in a different spot today?
Well, it was like, I can tell you, and this is where
okay.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Oh, it's the confidence piece. I was 11 years old and I was like, I want to make a ton of money. And like, I made my objective as simple as I need to sell these potatoes. And so I broke out an Excel spreadsheet and I said, all right, here's how much money I need. And here's some distribution channels that I can think of. Like, where do I see potatoes? I see them in stores. All right, I'm going to call stores. I see them on the side of the road. Maybe somebody wants it. Maybe I can sell them on the side of the road. And I made it as simple as that. And then I got on the phone and just started calling people. I was like, hey, my name's Justice. I'm yada, 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 trying to resell these potatoes, basically. I was like, would you like to take on boxes of these 50-pound potatoes, or these 50-pound boxes of potatoes? And they're like, how old are you? I was like, oh, I'm 11, but I can have my dad do these deals, And so I had this full business structure is what I'm going to call it. But I had the goal of, I'm going to do this, and no matter what, I'm just doing these things to do it. And I was going to say I'm shameless in what it was, right? As I went on in life, I started building and putting my own shame. Like the last business plan I wrote up was overly complex and went nowhere. And it's like I did more at 11 than I did, a couple years ago when I tried these other things. And I'm going to say those are parts of those failures to create successes that we need.
Let's bring that back to the last week. Going back, again, you had in your mind that you could accomplish that. You put together a few things, you moved forward. You were up, had a great honeymoon. You're up at Jackson Hole. Again, if you think about this, you had some thoughts and saw things that changed. You already knew this. This wasn't different than what you already knew. But I think it reconfirmed, and I think you maybe saw in a different way than you had been. Because again, in our lives, again, this goes back to the question I asked: where are you at? What are you doing? What have been your, do you have any gains? If not, you're like saying, well, poor me, oh my. Often that's because of the environment we're in as well.
Yeah.
You actually put yourself in a different environment, which helped.
Oh yeah.
Which is another really good thing too, right? By putting yourself somewhere else. But go ahead. Any other thoughts you have on that? And then we can kind of wrap up with a couple last things.
No, I think that's the biggest thing. And that's the thing I would say to anyone, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to work your way up in a career, is I'm going to say you can do whatever it is and don't overthink it. And that's way easier to say and then to just feel and do. But constantly think about that. I would say the amount of times I think about that in my day so I can see an opportunity for what it is and work it out to, hey, this is what it is, and then move on, is what I think the biggest thing is. And what I mean by that is literally what I said. Constantly in my day, I go and assess, like, how can I apply this and how can I dumb it down so I can feel like I can make it doable? And then I just actively just go do it shamelessly. If it's like I'll liken it to if you've ever learned a language or tried to interact with someone in a different language you didn't understand, you feel like a fool the first few times you try to speak. It's like crazy.
I slow down my speech. That makes no difference.
Oh, I'm all embarrassed. Just let it be what it is. Because at the end of the day, almost anyone I've ever interacted with,
nobody cares.
They're like, oh, thank you so much for trying and doing that. Let me tell you, if I have a product, a business, a service, a good, if I'm a great employee, just offer what you have and go do it. And that's what I'm going to say has been some of the biggest successes. That as you do those, it'll just compound and you can leverage it even more. So yeah, that'd be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's kind of really good today. I know there's a lot of things we're working on. We have a Thrive Thrive kind of strategy that we call, it's kind of this, and the name of our company is ThriveWorks 360. And one of the reasons we've done this is in our lives, it's not that there's just one thing or one path. And a lot of these things, they come around, right? Mm-hmm. And, it's even good and bad cycles in careers and in life. And part of this is building a structure that lets us actually continuously kind of keep that wheel rolling. So I know we're working on I'm going to call it the Thrive strategy. It's more of an implementation of things in your life, more physically kind of in a place. If you're in a career, if you're an entrepreneur, hey, how do I apply these things by taking a look at what they are? And then how do I, once you solve one problem, you get through it, guess what? Life is full of those, right? And as an entrepreneur, you're often just finding and solving the next biggest challenge that you're getting with. And then if you're a big business, corporate business or large business, the same thing can actually be applied not just to you, but to any single department or segment of a department as well. So we're working on that Thrive strategy. We also have what we're calling the Thrive mindset that we're working on too. That really helps, because I'll be honest with you, Justice, I don't think you can just say there's a strategy and you can't work on the mindset, because coming back to this, I've done this at work many times. And I read something recently. I was like, oh, that's a really easy way to kind of place this. But I'm like, hey, I want to put out this impossible goal. And when we do this, everybody's like, you shouldn't do that. Well, what happens is we naturally as humans try to solve whatever it is that we put in front of us. And you talked about the time frame. Yeah. If I thought school was 4 years, guess what?
It's going to be 4 years.
It's going to be 4 years. And that's because you're putting in your mind that time versus saying, I'm wondering if there is a way to change and alter what that output is. And if you're aggressive with that, you'll find a way to accomplish those goals. So long story short, we've got the Thrive mindset and the Thrive strategy. The mindset is there because you can set goals. What happens? You set too low of goals. Yeah. You set actually things that, if you might consider them a goal or an objective, they're weak. Like why do you need to be weak? Why can't you be strong? Why can't you be successful? Why can't you be, boisterous in where you want to go? If you can do those things and then we work on your mindset, actually those two come together and create the success, which is the output. Absolutely. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that kind of before we conclude with everybody.
No, I think that's really great. We're excited to roll out, a couple different variations of what that could be. And
yeah. Anything else on that?
No, that's great.
Okay. Well, thanks for being with us. Again, thanks for joining us here at ThriveWorks 360. We would ask you to comment with any thoughts that you have. Yeah. We're going to ask you to subscribe and give us a like so that we can come back up. We're going to work on chunking these down and building some things around the application. To me, the biggest is everybody talks about stuff.
Let's start doing
But something. How do we do? So there you go. Thanks, everybody.
That'd be awesome.